Right. So this is going to be the first episode of the weekly recaps, and I'm actually recording this before any of the following sections, or any of the past intro sections of any nation. So we'll quickly have a look at the race comparison as of right now at the start, and we can see that there's, well, ignore the usual population, that is probably a bit high, because neutrals have a lot of ports around the world that can be conquered by the players. But in terms of naval tonnage, France is the biggest one. Then is actually Ottomans have second largest. The Netherlands has the third largest. Britain has only fourth largest. I'm a bit surprised. But then there's a huge gap between Britain and Spain. And then from Spain to Portugal there's a large gap. And Mughals are almost as strong as Portugal in terms of the naval tonnage. And then pirates are smallest, of course, but they are kind of not meant to be facing any of these bigger navies head-on. More like do a little bit of raiding and plundering on their trade routes, but then try to hide somewhere out of the way just to not get caught. And in terms of commercial tonnage, it goes mostly similarly. I mean, Ottomans are actually a little bit smaller than Britain in that shape, but that's not really an issue. Then stations, everyone has about the same amount of stations, because everyone starts with 10 fuel harvesters. And then there's some shipping line tonnage, which actually Mughals have the largest amount by the looks of it. Portugal has the second largest. Then it's the pirates, of all people. Then Ottomans, Netherlands. Actually, no, Ottoman, Spain, Netherlands, France, and then Britain. Ground units, it's very similar. I mean, each nation has pretty much similar starting units, aside from two exceptions, pirates and Mughals. Or certain units per size of colony. So the colonies are divided into large colony, small colony, and then trade station. Although most of them actually have just, basically in terms of the land units, there's only a capital, then a colony, and then a station. Be that a trade station or a space station. And the capital has 2 full brigades of units, and then colonies have 1 brigade. And 1 brigade is 6 companies of light infantry, not lightning, 3 pike and shots, 1 cavalry, 3 howitzer batteries, 1 siege battery, 1 baggage train, and 10 marine sections. And I believe that's about it. That should be it. And then these stations have 2 battalions of troops, which is a much smaller amount in terms of troops, but yeah, so they have very similar amounts of troops, but of course some of them have a bit higher capacity of building more troops, so that will make a difference. Of course, to use your troops you need to actually be able to land the troops there, and if the enemy has a large fleet then it's not going to work. Now, in terms of naval shipyard capacity, France actually has the biggest, then it's Britain, then Netherlands, and then Spain and Portugal and Ottomans are fairly close to each other. Mughals have a little bit less, and then pirates have only 26,000 tons, which is not much, let me tell you. Then in terms of fuel and colonies, France actually has a lot of fuel. Mughals, Netherlands, Portugal, and Britain all have very similar amounts. Then Ottomans have 60 million and Spain has 64 million. Pirates have only 3.5 million. Considering that some of the larger ships have more than 1 million in capacity, it means that pirates are going to have a problem. Of course, once they get their fuel harvesters in, it should be alright. And I'm not going to go through everything, but you can hopefully pause the video and have a look at it yourself. But for example, in research, everyone except pirates start with the same amount of research labs, just for balance reasons. And then, yeah, that's about it. There's a lot of forced labor, mining, and construction, which is not good for economy, but it's good for getting a lot of production capacity out of your population. Well, not your population, but you make them somewhere else. But these are the starting stuff, so no one actually started with the construction factories or anything like that. They will have to build those on their own. But anyway, let's, I'll bring you guys back in a little bit. The year was mostly calm. Mostly nations focused on surveying the surrounding areas. Of course, some accidents with the neutral power were had, and neutrals actually sunk, I think, about 6 or 7 ships in total from various nations. The Spanish were probably the only one not facing any neutral powers so far, and the Dutch managed to narrowly escape. But I think pretty much every else nation had one ship destroyed from them. At least one ship. As I said, mostly the exploration was in the regions that they already had and the surrounding areas. I'm sure that in the future years they will spread out a bit more organized perhaps. But right now it's still the start of the game really. Actually all of the nations were having some monetary problems, and that's partially because of I decided to go with the forced labor mining camps, which of course do not produce tax, but on the other hand, a lot of them can be had with a small population, technically speaking. Of course, you don't want to build them on your own areas, but I decided to go with, as for the starting construction and mining stuff, only forced labor stuff, or forced labor camps and so forth. Because I figured that it would allow at least higher output. Otherwise, it is very unlikely that they'd be able to keep up with their refineries and such. Then France attacked Rome, which was unfortunately not quite as successful, and the Brits attacked Copenhagen, which had a tiny bit more success, but still rather unsuccessful. Civilian mining complexes were found by Mughals, Brits, Portugal, and Portugal technically has 2 now, and the Dutch. And that is no doubt going to be a nice boon of either resources or money in the upcoming years. Then, by the end of the year, France decided to do another charge on Rome, which did go a lot better this time. Sure enough, a lot of the French ships took a fair bit of damage, mostly due to the armor, luckily, so no important components were destroyed. But eventually the coastal fortifications of Rome were completely destroyed, and now it is currently rather open for an assault on land. Of course, there's still plenty of garrisons remaining, so it's not going to be as easy as it might sound. Now let's have a quick look at the stats at the end of the episode here. Feel free to pause, I'm not going to go through everything here, but you can have a quick look at what's going on here. So, the naval tonnages is actually pretty much the same as it was before. I mean, the French have built a little bit more, and then Dutch are still the second largest. British and Ottomans are almost tied, but the Ottoman shipbuilding speed has been hampered by the economic situation a fair bit. In commercial tonnage, it's still top 4, which is the Dutch, the Spanish, the Brits, and the French, that have similar numbers, a little bit difference, but the difference is at most 120,000 tons. So it's not that huge in the grand scheme of things. Some of the nations have been building more space stations, and some of them have not. So there's a bit of a difference there, but it's not necessarily all that huge. Where it is important though is shipping line tonnage. Most of the bigger nations, or nations that have big navies, actually don't have a huge shipping line tonnage yet, whereas the pirates actually have the largest one, which is rather interesting. And of course, in crown units, the 4 big ones have the most troops, because it's just mostly colony garrisons. Now, shipyards haven't really changed from the start of the year, and the fuel... Oh, actually, fuel at colonies has changed a fair bit. The French have the most right now, followed by the Dutch, and then Portuguese, or actually Mughals, Portuguese, and then the Brits, Spanish, Ottomans, and of course the pirates have the least. Of course they do have the smallest navy as well, so they don't need as much. and they are going to be the weakest of the bunch anyway. Now, no one hasn't built any research facilities yet, but they are underway, and the rest of the installations we're not going to go through. You can pause and have a look at it. Of course, it might be a bit small to see in the video, so sorry about that, but not huge differences from the start of the year, but I'm sure that the differences will start piling up in the upcoming years quite nicely. Now, this part of the episode is more of a background stuff rather than the actual game itself, so if you're not interested in this, then you're more than welcome to continue with your day. But if you are interested in knowing a little bit more, then do stick around. So first of all, there's a few things. I did not manage to set up new colonies during this first year, mostly due to lack of time. I did spend over 100 hours in the span of about 2.5 weeks since between recording this and when 1.9 came out. And even prior to that, there was tens of hours of planning and preparation. So I just didn't really have time to do everything that I wanted to do in this first week. But I'm sure that now that all the preparation has been done, or at least most of it has been done, then I can at least have a bit more time to do all the other stuff, like setting up new colonies, setting up manual trade routes for certain ships, or at least ships carrying minerals and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, I should start probably next week. And of course, stuff like planetary governors haven't been assigned either, and there's some other smaller things that have not been set up correctly yet. Now, I decided to leave out the individual survey reports from nations. At first, I was recording them, but then I realized that it would be just stretching the episode a bit too much. And secondly, like, there's close to 100 survey ships at the start of the game that started going around, and even if I was only taking stuff or planets that had more than 1 million tons of resources total, then it would still be a bit too much for content, so I decided to skip that just to save up a little bit of time in recording this. Now, diplomacy, there's already been, like, the starting diplomacies I set up manually. Of course, in the future it's going to be a bit more organic, what the game has intended. Of course, if a player decides that they want to ally with someone and the other player has agreed to this, then I will still space manager the alliance in there, just for the heck of it, because it's gonna make the roleplay a bit easier when you don't need to wait for a few years to be able to ally someone. And there will of course be more of diplomacy later on. In the upcoming weeks there's going to be potentially some wars, or I'm pretty sure that there's going to be wars sooner or later. I'm not sure when exactly, but I'm sure that there will be some PvP action, which will be rather interesting to see how it turns out. And speaking of saving up time, I did also originally record whenever a ship was built, but then I decided to, since there was a lot of ships being built, especially the smaller ones, until I realized that pretty much every economy was having a bit of a problem, so I decided to cut out anything that was 4th rate or below, or technically above in the numbers, but still, like 4th rate and smaller ships, I decided to not mention them in the videos. But they have been built if they've been set up in the start to be built. And I did not go through the starting ship designs in much detail at all. The new ships I will go in a bit more detail on what's in there and all that, but it's just every nation had about 16 or 20 ships, somewhere around there. So going through all of those would have taken a bit too much time. The newer ships are going to be perhaps a bit less frequent, so I will be able to go through them a bit better. Then, speaking of ships, the ship speeds are currently a bit too low. Of course, the ships are not utilizing the full speed. I mean, there is a document down below that kind of goes through the basic rules, and in there I said that one, like in naval terms, 1 knot would be equal to 200 kilometers per second. So I decided that max allowed speed of a ship would be 2000 kilometers per second then. But I think I'm going to raise that up to 3000, so it would be technically 15 knots, which is a bit too high for a sail ship, to be fair. But for the interest of not having to spend a year just to sail back and forth over the Atlantic, for example. It's probably good. Of course, the ships currently have about 1,000 kilometers speed, so they could have already doubled that speed with the original rules. But I'll probably increase that to 3,000. They're not going to be reaching that immediately, but that's kind of the max. Of course, also I'm not going to be researching the engine size increases, because I want to, like, especially the bigger ships, to have 3 engines, so 3 sails, or 3 masts rather, and the max size is going to be the 25 hull size per ship, per engine, and the ship sizes will be static as well. Like, first rate is always going to be the 20,000 tons, and so forth. The neutrals were a bit too brutal in this, especially since there was a bit of a design flaw in my ships. They didn't have size 1 sensors, or resolution 1 sensors, so they couldn't actually spot the fortifications there, or the STOs, or the troops at all. So they would be just firing into the planet itself and hoping to kill something. The Brits got pretty lucky and managed to kill like 2 or 3 of their coastal batteries by just firing on Copenhagen, but it didn't really work. But I decided to leave that in. It was a design flaw, that was my mistake, but at the same time it gave a bit of a nice roleplay element to the start of this. And speaking of roleplay, I did try to do some voice acting, very subtle. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily subtle, but I've never really done it before, so probably throughout the series I'll probably refine my skills a little bit more. I do want to have a bit of a roleplay with voice acting and all that sort of stuff in here as well. Hopefully it goes well. But starting to do the voice acting was a bit of a spur of the moment decision while recording. So yeah, I didn't really plan it too much beforehand, which I probably should have done a little bit more, but time is limited. When I get time, and if there's interest, I could do some background videos explaining the making of and various rules and restrictions. The rules and restrictions are, of course, mostly explained in the document, or the Google document in the description, so make sure to check out that if you're interested in, like, what's the background of this and so forth, like what sort of restrictions, like, for example, why are we using plasma carronades as the main weapon, and so forth, and why are we using missiles or something like that. But, well, for that reason it's simple, missiles wouldn't really fit something like this. I mean, this is an Age of Sail like roleplay, not space roleplay necessarily. I mean, we're using some of the terms interchangeably, to be fair, but still. But if you have any questions, leave a comment, or you can join my Discord. A link is in the description, should be somewhere in the bottom, and I'll try to answer any questions the best I can. Of course, Discord is probably easier if you want to see stuff like ship designs. I can just easily then copy and paste them there. I'm probably not going to go through everything in the videos themselves. Just to keep the episodes relatively short. Of course, once the wars start happening and all that, then it's gonna drag out a little bit, but still. I want to keep them relatively bite-sized, just so that it's not an hour of going through everything. Because recording an hour per nation is going to be a lot of work, especially since with this many starting fleets, starting players and all that, the game is actually not all that quick. I mean, it's roughly the same as VB6 some 20 years in. Well, not necessarily that much, but yeah, the fact that there's just so many jump points, as you can see from the map here, there is a lot of connections, and then the pathfinding is trying to figure out which is the quickest way and so forth, or at least jumps way. So yeah, the game is not very quick, and it's probably gonna get even slower. So we'll see how it goes, but of course, once some of the fleets get destroyed and so forth, it should get a little bit easier. And the fact that there is no AI, so to speak of, so it's all controlled by me, one way or another. But anyway, thanks for Stellar Drone for allowing me to use the music. It's I actually recorded without the music, so I'm not entirely sure how it sounds while recording this audio, but I'm pretty sure that it worked quite well. But I hope you enjoyed this. Do check out all the players taking part in this. Links are, once again, in the description below, and I'll see you tomorrow with another episode. Until then, bye bye.